So good morning on a Friday morning. Yay, we've reached Friday of another work week. I'm Joy, I'm from Galileo, and on the line we also have Pat Herndon, who is an assistant state librarian with GPLS, Georgia Public Library Service, and she is directly in charge of the GLASS program. The GLASS program. She will be bringing the presentation today. Thank you all so much for joining us, and thanks, Pat, for being on today.
Thank you, Joy, very much. And you can go to the next slide. And I have to remember to do that on my thing, too. As Joy said, I'm with Georgia Public Library Service, and Georgia Public Library Service is the agency that intakes all the federal funds that come in to support library services in Georgia, primarily servicing public libraries. And we also help administer state funding that is directed to public libraries. And in that role, we seek to provide scalable technology and services. And one of the services that I, in particular, pay attention to is to make sure that all libraries in Georgia provide accessible services. Accessible has a lot of meanings. When Joy and I started talking about what type of Galileo program they were going to be doing, we talked about, well, what is accessible? To us right now, in this context, accessible means that the services that a library provides can be used by people with varying abilities and disabilities. People that might be low vision, people that might be hard of hearing, people that might have mobility issues. And this is what I do for a living. I talk to libraries about this every day. So, Joy, next slide. So, why worry about accessible services in libraries? Well, one reason is it is the law. But more importantly than something just being a law that you have to pay attention to, is it helps you meet the needs of people that are in your community. Every community has a population with special needs related to accessing information and communication. The Americans with Disabilities Act was passed in 1990. It prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. Then there are also other laws, such as Section 504 and 508 of the 1973 Rehabilitation Act. And that law makes sure that electronic information is available to people with disabilities. These laws existed before the internet was a thing. It mostly affects government agencies and agencies that get funding from government agencies. But it drives the marketplace. If you stop and think what a big consumer of information products, software that dictates how websites work, how search database interfaces for all kinds of government agencies. The vendors, the people that are producing the software products now understand that they must build their products with accessibility in mind. This is a huge focus now, primarily. Like I said, the Americans with Disabilities Act was established in 1990. So the idea is pretty well known and common now. If you build a building, your doors have to be a certain width, your bathrooms have to be accessible, you need curb cuts so you can get in and out of the parking lot. That's kind of, we get it. But people have forgotten that once people are in the building, and the way we use and gather information these days, that it's just important for our electronic information, our ICT, our information and communication technology, also be accessible. And why is this so important? Because communities are aging as the baby boomer generation has entered old age. By 2030, all baby boomers will be older than 65. This will expand the size of the older population so that 1 in every 5 residents will be of retirement age. Older people are projected to outnumber children for the first time in U.S. history. And in the context of disability, most disability is age acquired. Next slide, please. Now, if I was standing in front of you in a real room, I'd be looking to see heads nod or shake, so I would know take the temperature of the room, but I can't do that. But does anybody remember 23 things? This was in 2006. Helene Blowers from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Library developed a learning program to introduce library staff to the idea that the internet allows people to be creators. The internet is now, it's email communication. YouTube was new at the time. Social networks were new at the time. Think back to 2006. In 2006, I think it's fair to say that a lot of frontline library staff still, some of them didn't know how to do an attachment to an email. I know I encountered that in the branches I worked in. So Helen Blowers observed this, and she decided that her staff was going to learn about the new ways that technology was making things possible. So they wanted to set a tone for learning in their organization. And they wanted to make sure that all the staff, the legacy staff, not just the fresh people out of school that had been introduced to all this and understood it, but the people that had worked in the library for 20 years could begin to understand what this was. So they went ahead and, within their culture of learning, established a training program that was interactive, required participation, required peer support, and gave recognition to the people for having taken the time to learn something new. At the time, she was looking at teaching people what blogging was, how to download and use images when you're creating handouts, learning about RSS feeds and news readers, folksonomies, wikis, podcasts, etc. Her idea was that library staff needed a vision of the future. We could argue today that we are at that future. Everything I just listed, if it hasn't already gone out of fashion, it's something that has changed what we do every day. So they did an organizational rollout, and they gave incentives for participation. And I'm thinking that they were given flash drives, which was a cool thing at the time. But in 2012, she learned that other libraries had learned about her program, and by 2012, Helen Blowers reported that she had heard of over 450 adaptations for her program. It encouraged the workers that did not feel as comfortable with technology to partner with those that did, and it included exercises to impart learning through experience. So, with that in mind, next slide. I've got a pitch. My presentation today is not really going to be so much to tell you how to do things. It's to tell you some things that you really need to know about, and to give you some resources that you could independently go in and learn about. I can't incentivize this for you because I'm not your continuing education director, but if any of you are CE directors and you wanted to put together a program with some of these resources that is customized to fit what you're doing in your libraries, this is a path you can follow. So I've got 5 things. Some of them are going to be small, but they're going to have impact. 5 simple things to learn to incorporate into your daily practice and into your library service. Next slide. Okay. When you think about accessibility in a library, like I said, the very first thing you need to think about is Can people get into your building? Can they move around easily once they're in there? Like I said, the ADA was passed in 1990. Most buildings have addressed public access concerns, but not all. So one of your challenges will be to look at the areas that may have been neglected. Look at the signage in the parking lot. Go out and take a look at the striping in the parking lot. Has any concrete shifted in the parking lot that would make it harder to get into the building? Maybe it was designed and laid out very nicely at the beginning, but age affects buildings and parking lots too. Walk through the building and look for things that you can change. And guess what? If you're not a decision maker, find out who that decision maker is and report those problems to the person that can affect a change. All right. There's an exercise that goes with this. Next slide. Yeah. Okay. I challenge everyone to become familiar with the basics of the ADA for compliance for a public facility and focus on, I've said public libraries, but I know there are people on this session that are not in public libraries, but take the same approach. As someone who focuses on this topic a lot, of course, the American Library Association has lots of resources, but I have a favorite document. I like the IFLA, the International Federation of Libraries. I like their IFLA Access to Libraries for Persons with Disabilities checklist. Here's why I like this checklist best. This checklist is more functional. Sometimes if you go to the stuff by the U.S. Access Board or the Justice Department, it just feels so prescriptive. And it's like, oh, well, I have to meet this standard. I have to check this. I have to make sure this measurement is exactly this. It might not even be the best measurement. Maybe it needs to exceed a measure. So the IFLA checklist is more about the function. Are the functions being met? So this is a resource, and these slides will be available after the talk because they are loaded with resources. And like I said, I'm not telling you all the details. I'm telling you where to find the details, and I'm telling you what details you need to be looking for. But this is an important exercise that you may find unfulfilling. You may identify problems that you knew existed, but you didn't feel empowered to change. But it is important to have an inventory of concerns so that they can be addressed with maintenance programs, construction programs, and with your purchasing priorities. Share your report with people who make decisions. This could be you, but it could be your county manager, could be a dean. It may require assistance from your community, but at least you're going to know what needs to be done. And if you are someone who makes purchasing decisions when you're purchasing furnishings, remember that items that made it to your report so that you can consider dimensions and functionality on your next purchases. Like I said, I like the IFLA checklist because it's written in simple language. It's focused on outcomes rather than focused on dimensions. And there are other resources available, and I'll have some of those listed at the end. This would be a time when I'd say, if you've got any questions, speak up. All right. Next, make sure that people can access your computers. It's a little more involved than you might think. Next slide. Now I'm offering you another exercise. Become familiar with the accessibility features built into the operating systems of your public access computers so that you can assist library customers with these tools. This is the biggie, and this is where technology has changed just so dramatically in the last, I'd say, 10 years. It's absolutely amazing. Remember how I led with saying that vendors, the software developers, understand that to be sold to government purchasers, they have to meet certain standards? Well, they get it, and they've been working on it very hard. So this exercise, like I said, it would be customized to what you're using in your libraries. But this is probably one of the easiest ways that you can serve people with disabilities that come to your library that you are neglecting to do. And I'm saying that out of my many years experience in working in libraries. These are tools that if you don't need to use them, you've probably never looked for them. You've probably never tinkered with them. You've probably never toggled them on and off, which is what they are for the most part in each operating system. So let me talk a little bit about what we got going on here. So first of all, you would want to identify what operating system you've got on your computers. Are you Windows? Are you iOS? Are you Mac? Are you Chrome? Chrome also has a lot of accessibility features built into for Chromebook use and Chrome boxes, whatever's out there these days. The exercise that I would suggest is that first figure out what it is you're working with, then use the help screens and use that operating system's website to learn about what features are available. And there's examples. Microsoft has an accessibility website, and it is amazing. And I probably should have built in a review of it, but I'm always afraid of trying to click over and have something not connect, so I didn't include that. But this is part of the exercise, and if you use these slides, I did check all the links and make sure everything was valid before I closed this out. But the Microsoft tool, for example, it asks you, okay, what kind of disability are you trying to serve? Here's our recommended tools that might help you solve these problems encountered by. Again, we think of vision, certainly. We think of sound, certainly. But there's also things like people with essential tremor. They can't maybe keep their fingers on the keyboard. There's actually features built into operating systems that you can toggle on and off, features that make it easier for somebody with mobility impairments to use a keyboard, or somebody that can't really use all the keys on a keyboard but could navigate through with the arrow keys, or different interfaces that just make it easier for them to control the system. So my notes on this slide say it's time to learn something you probably may have not played with, though it's been there for years. And in the library setting, your goal will never be to teach someone to use these features unless you're comfortable with them. As a librarian, you should know what's available on the computer. You should know that these features are there and they exist, and that you can make them available to customers. You should know how to access them. You should know where they're hiding on the computer. You should know where the controls are. The ease of access controls is what they call it in Microsoft. If for some reason your IT department has blocked access to these ease of access controls, for example, in a Microsoft system, advocate to get those features accessible to staff and patrons. Consider your library having earbuds available so that somebody that needed to listen to content because they couldn't see it, that you could easily supply them. You know, you can get them super, super cheap, and that's just something to think about. So the exercise that I've made part of this program focuses on Microsoft Windows 10, but you could do some exploration of this on any operating system that you were encountering. You'll just find some amazing features that you probably never knew existed. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is a biggie. Again, if I was standing in front of you, I would be saying, has anybody heard what a screen reader is, how it operates, who it serves? I wish I could see heads bob right now, but I can't. But here you go. A screen reader is a program that for someone who is blind and cannot read the information on a computer screen, a screen reader can read it aloud to them. Now, there's a couple of important things to know. It's kind of like the old saying, garbage in, garbage out. it's going to count on good web design, good document design for the screen reader to work appropriately. And if you ever would fool around with one, play around with it for a few minutes, it would change your point of view anytime you're posting something on a web page. I know the University System of Georgia has made making accessible web pages a priority. I've been to several talks and presentations at conferences on creating accessible documents, and I know that everybody's out there striving to get this done in the university setting, but I've been trying to get people in the public library setting to get this same mindset that you need to know what a screen reader program is, you need to know how it's used, and you need to know how whatever you're posting online, the quality of your code behind it affects the ability of a screen reader to work properly. So, let me see, I didn't get to the right slides. There it is. Okay, so there's a couple of big names in screen readers right now, and JAWS has been around for a long time, and JAWS actually stands for Job Access with Speech. And the idea was that if employers would have screen reader software on computers, that people who were vision impaired could do computer work if the screen could be read aloud to them. And so a lot of vocational rehabilitation programs would teach people how to use JAWS and provide the software. Well, then it became a big thing to suggest that libraries have this available on their computers. But I'll tell you one thing, JAWS is quite expensive. It does have annual licensing. It does need to be renewed and updated. And you'll go through all that, and you truly may never have a customer come in and ask for it. So you're probably saying, well, if they never ask, why would I have it? Well, maybe they never come in because you don't have it, and they didn't think they could use the feature in the library, so they didn't come in. So the idea is, number one, anything that you do for your library that makes your library more accessible, I want you to talk about it. But besides JAWS, there's a program called NVDA, which stands for Non-Visual Desktop Access. It was developed by a couple of guys, I believe, from Australia that thought JAWS cost too much money. So they went ahead and created their own software product. Right now, it is freeware. Anybody can get it, download it, and install it. It can be toggled on and toggled off. It can be downloaded onto a flash drive and just plugged in and used when necessary. So we put together at my library, Georgia Public Library Service, on the Glass web page, we put together an entire webinar on screen readers so you can understand what they are. Some libraries out there might have JAWS on a computer. If you do have JAWS on a computer, get around, just play with it. Or if you do find a patron that uses it, ask them to show it to you so you can understand how it works and how it helps them use the information on your web pages or any web page they have to access, again, your ICT, information communication technology. The other part of the exercise in exercise 3 would be to download NVDA, non-visual desktop access, installed on your PC. I personally have done this, and every time I do a presentation, I'll click through it and see how the slides are behaving when I'm doing a presentation to make sure that they're reading properly. And again, there's a lot of links on here, but there's lots of tutorials, video tutorials on how to use screen reader software. So the challenge and the exercise would be to use NVDA to navigate a web page, use it to navigate a Word document, and then to assess, typo on my slide, assess how your experience differs from using the built-in Windows narrator feature, because that is a tool. Chrome and Windows, Chrome interface, Windows interface, but certainly the Apple interfaces, they do have their own built-in narration. Speech, like text to speech. However, there's varying utility for the navigation, and most people that do rely on these things do prefer the dedicated screen reader programs rather than the built-ins. It's nice to know the built-ins are there, though. Let me just go over some more details in case I left it out. No, I would say one thing. NVDA and JAWS are very similar, and my standard comparison is to say that it's like the difference between Word and Google Docs. Yes, they're different, but if you can do one, you can do the other, and it's about the same level of difference. So, and in my notes, I say here that if you took the time to watch the video tutorials that you can watch, it would be about an hour to go through that. So again, this presentation is just to explain to you what you need to know, pointing you to lots of resources where you can find out how to learn something, and giving you the idea that there's something out there that you might not have known about that could be very helpful to the right people. Okay, so let's move to the next one. Accessible documents. That's what I was just alluding to. If you're going to be posting things online and you know somebody needs to rely on screen reader technology or other ways to navigate through documents, those documents need to be created accessible. Next slide. Okay, so now we're to exercise 4. And the objective of exercise 4 is to learn the tools available in Microsoft Word and PowerPoint to create accessible documents and to create accessible documents that can be navigated with a screen reader. I focused on Microsoft as I was putting this together, and I will tell you, probably because I'm not so good at Adobe products, but I know a lot of documents people are creating with Adobe, and I didn't mention them before, but they too have accessibility tools built in. So first part of this exercise would be to review Microsoft's accessibility tips. It's built into Word. You can get tips. Install the Microsoft Accessibility Checker. Well, actually, it's already installed as well, and I kind of learned that later on. But when you do review document, and you on the print screen in Microsoft where it says in Office Suite products where it says to review document before you print it out, one of the options is check for accessibility. So this is something that's very important to do. And once you start using a tool like this and you start reading the suggestions of what you could do to make a document more accessible, it can become part of your habit. And as it becomes part of your habit, you go, oh man, I never thought about this. But it's like making sure that if you put images on a document, that you've got a text that lives behind that image that a screen reader could read to describe what the image is of. You know, picture of people walking across the street. That would be the alternative text to one of the slides I began with. So one of the exercises I would suggest is that you create a document, run the check accessibility tool, excuse me, make the suggested changes, and pay real good attention to those instructions where it's telling you what to do. Then take that same document, run it through your screen reader that I asked you to play around with before, and use the commands to jump from heading to heading and enable the Microsoft narrator and navigate to read the document. And then go through that all over again with PowerPoint. PowerPoint's a little bit trickier. And if you've never used any of these things, you still might be going, what are you talking about? What does a screen reader do? Okay, let me give you an example. You open a web page, your eyes scan very quickly, and you go, there's the heading I need. That's the page, the part of the page I wanted to read about. I don't need to read every line of this page. I want to go straight to whatever point. And there are visual clues the way that a page is set up. Like there might be the topics listed in bold print and always indented far to the left. Well, a screen reader will read it, and somebody could eventually get down to that with the screen reader reading it. But if you mark that the heading is a heading, then the person could just go heading, 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 and get down to the heading they needed to get to quickly. It allows them, the person that needs to navigate, to go ahead and get to where they need to get quicker, because they can't scan as quickly since they can't make out the visual cues. They've got to have the cues built into the way the document is put together. So that's just something to think about. And once you start thinking about it, you eventually start thinking a little bit differently. And I do work with people that rely on these tools every day to get their jobs done. So I know it's very important. So just following my notes again. So you've made it all the way through exercise 4 and you've become familiar with your screen readers. And now you got to navigate documents. But as I said, this screen reader won't work unless the document has been formatted properly. So it's taken all these years for the architectural standards for accessibility to be applied, that our doors are a certain width, that we make sure our shelves are certain inches apart. Well, now we've got to look at how the documents that we create and post online, we've got to make them accessible. So this is like that new focus, like I said. So this is the first step in making sure that our ICT is accessible, that we understand that people are using accessibility tools, and that we understand how to create content that is going to be easily navigated with those tools. So this, again, is a change your habit. I run an accessibility check every time I do a document, just like I run a spell check. I don't know about you, but I run a spell check every time too. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay. All right. Next slide. Okay, this one, it's kind of self-serving. I am the director of GLASS. GLASS stands for Georgia Libraries for Accessible Statewide Services. We are Georgia's talking book and braille library, and I think it's essential that every librarian in Georgia know that we exist, know who we serve, and know that they can be a certifying authority and sign people up for this, basically. So I can't give any talk on accessibility without reminding people that GLASS is around, that we do serve our patrons right now, and we have just done a huge purge to make sure that our active user list is truly active users. We're serving over 10,000 Georgians right now with our services. We provide audiobooks. We provide very low-tech, easy-to-use audiobook players. A lot of our patrons are people that have not grown up with technology and are very uncomfortable with technology. So we give them the lowest tech way to access our services, and that's we physically send them a very simple machine, has big buttons on it, very easy for them to use. Better technology skills, our services also provide free downloadable audiobooks. Those of you in public libraries are going, hey, we do too. Well, I'll tell you one thing. Number one, our books, there's no wait list for our books. We don't have to say, oh, we only own 5 copies of the #1 bestseller. Ours accessible digitally, and we don't have a waiting queue. So everybody could read Michelle Obama's Becoming book at the same time. And I understand that was one of the most lent books that we've ever had in our system. But just know we're there. We are part of Georgia Public Library Service. Our webpage is appended to the Georgia Public Library Service webpage. Our application is on there. Our services are for people who have print impairment, and that means due to vision, low vision, blindness, Or this is the one a lot of people don't know about, an inability to hold a book and turn the pages. If you can't physically turn the pages, then you are eligible for our services. A librarian can take an assessment just by looking at someone, trusting them, believing them, and sign the form for us. I've had a lot of people say, do you have to be a degreed librarian? I will say, as the director in Georgia, my answer is no, you have to work in the library. If you're the one that the customer thinks is the librarian, you're the librarian. So I do let anybody who's working as a front desk, library associate, reader advisor, whatever they're called in your libraries, that assist customers on the front line, yeah, I'll accept a signature from that. There's another category that's huge category of people we also serve, and that is people with, they call it organic reading dysfunctions, talking about neurologically based reasons that they can't read, such as dyslexia. Now, what we don't serve is people who are trying to learn to read, or people English is not their first language. This is how they want to learn to read. Not doing that.
You
So
broke up there for a minute. Can you repeat that last part?
What's the last thing you did hear? Well, anyway.
The last thing that I heard was related to the people who you can provide services to with neurological reasons that they can't read, but then there are others who don't have that is not in your base.
Okay. Yeah, we can't provide, our services are not to serve people who are English as second language and they're trying to, have an audio book and a printed book together and learn English. No. And it's not for people who may have not been taught to read that need to learn to read or get content in audio format that way. Ours is for people with print impairment. The thing about people with dyslexia, that is a little bit different. We know a librarian can't assess dyslexia, so we do ask that a physician sign off on that. Nationally, we know that's a problem. That's a barrier to service, and there is a pilot program going on in Texas to see what happens to readership levels if we take away the need for a doctor's signature. But right now, a doctor's signature is required for that specific category. And the form, that application, explains all this very well. So let me get where I am. The exercise that it's associated with this is we do have some tutorials in the Georgia Public Library Service Learning Center. Hey, there's an hour of CE there, and you can learn all about glass. We even have a little YouTube video. We have really well-developed web pages. Our application is online. We do have an online catalog, and we provide service to another producer besides the National Library Service for the Blind, which is part of Library of Congress. That's our basic level of service. We also provide access to Bookshare. And Bookshare, a lot of students use Bookshare, students with disabilities. But once they graduate from school, they would have to pay for access to that. But if they join GLASS, we're providing free membership to Bookshare as well. And Bookshare, the NLS program, our basic core collection is 100,000 titles or more. Bookshare expands to, they're probably pushing 800,000 titles right now. So the last part of my exercise on that is challenge yourself. This is a strong one. Challenge yourself. Enroll at least one customer in GLASS. So this wraps it up. I hope that you would take some of this back, play around with some of this. I know that it's really difficult to be sitting there looking at the slides go in front of you with all those links in them and not be able to access them. But I can send you the slides. Joy can send you the slides. We're going to post all of this on the Georgia Niche Academy, Georgia Public Library's continuing education site, Niche Academy. Joy puts these recordings up on YouTube. So you'll have access to this. And I do have on the resources, I do have the full website spelled out. So if for some reason the hot links didn't work, you would be able to see. My email address is on this slide. I'd like to hear any feedback. And if anybody does go through this as the 23 things like Helen Flowers had people do, I would love to hear about it. I really would love to see this go somewhere and to see more librarians in Georgia take the time to learn these 5 things. Thank you. And I'm open to questions.
Hi, everyone. It's Joy. I have uploaded directly into the chat the slides. I'll also put them in an email, but so that you have them sitting right there, you can open it from the chat window. Are there any questions that anyone has at this time? If so, please go ahead and type those into the chat or use the raise your hand feature. We'll hold for a little bit, see if there are any questions that come up. Are there any questions, Pat, that people typically have of your resources that maybe you haven't gone over, or something that you anticipate being a question as we move into, the summer and fall semesters of schools where we're not sure what's gonna happen?
Well, a lot of people don't know that, and I didn't say this, that GLASS serves people of all ages. The collection of books that we have in GLASS are similar to what you find in any public library, but the collection of books that we offer through Bookshare very often match resources you might find in, let's say, a technical school program, manuals, things like that, how-tos. A lot of things that college students need are in the Bookshare program. And Bookshare includes resources as audio. It's going to be text-to-speech audio, and the NLS collection is narrator-read audio. But Bookshare has resources that really would meet the needs of a lot more adults, specifically that are trying to learn something, task-based stuff as well as the popular fiction. But the formats in Bookshare are text-to-speech audio, highlighted text where the word gets a little bar that moves as you go across the page. That helps some people that can't track very well when they're reading. It can be shown in large print. So just a lot of various forms. I think it's even in digital braille. Didn't talk any about digital braille. Digital braille exists. It's a thing. And anyway, I'm trying to think of what else about the documents and the buildings. I don't know. I get a lot of questions all the time. I get a question, does the back workroom need to be accessible or just the front of the library? No, it all needs to be accessible. That's something else to think about.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, if your building isn't accessible in the back, let's say your workroom, can't get into it, or it's too crowded, or there's not enough room to move around, you might decide not to hire somebody that could have done the job if your space was designed appropriately. So little things like that are something to think about.
Thank you for answering that. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, I tried to share the file.
If you can jot down my email or go to Georgia Public Library Services website, there's contact information for all of us. I can send out these slides. I'll be happy.
I'm going to send the slides out to everyone afterwards. I was trying to give them a chance while we were in the presentation to access the slides, but it won't It won't do that. So everyone will have them later for you to peruse through. And I'm sure if you all have questions later after viewing some of the information from the links, like Pat said, her email address is right there. And I'm sure she would welcome any questions that you may have after the presentation as well.
Thank you all so much.
All right. Well, I think we will close out there. I want to thank Pat for coming on this morning and doing this presentation for us. And I want to thank everyone for joining us. The presentation will be available probably Monday is when I will probably get to the recording, and it will also be uploaded to YouTube. So thank everyone so much for attending. Have a good weekend. And these were additional resources. Have a good weekend. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.